Okay, we start back in March 1918 in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, which is right in the middle of Oklahoma, not too far from Oklahoma City. At the time, in 1918, the population of Kingfisher was 2,500 people. Today, it is much larger, bustling metropolis of 5,000 people. But of course, those 5,000 people have just about every retail need of theirs serviced in a first-class way by the local Walmart supercenter that is located just south of town.
Walmart grew at a much faster rate than the 2x that Kingfisher grew in a century.
This is crazy. Kingfisher, 2,500 person Kingfisher around this time, is also the birthplace of the Coleman Company. You know, like the outdoor, like camping
no way.
gear? Yeah, started in Kingfisher, Oklahoma.
Didn't Jim Weber from our Brooks episode start his career at Coleman?
Oh, I think that might be right. Oh, yeah.
We're on like an accidental CPG retailing kick here.
I know. So great. Well, anyway, back in March of 1918 in Kingfisher, one Samuel Moore Walton was born to Thomas Gibson Walton and Nancy Lee, their first oldest child. And at the time of his birth, Tom and Nancy were farmers. But it was 1918. This was right at the end of World War I. We're heading into the roaring 20s in America. People are raising their standards of living. The country's modernizing. They wanted to move up in the world. And so his dad goes from working on the farm himself to getting into farm financing. He becomes a mortgage broker for farms, working with his brother in the business. This is a theme that's going to recur in the Walton family. And speaking of brothers, in December 1921, Sam gets one for himself, one James Lawrence Walton,
Bud,
better known as Bud. Shortly after Bud is born, the family moves from Oklahoma to Missouri, where they move around a bunch before ultimately settling down in the lovely, we can personally say, truly, genuinely lovely town of Columbia, Missouri.
Home of Capital Camp.
Yes, home of the University of Missouri Capital Camp and Permanent Equity, and our friend Brent Beshore there.
Yep.
So the 20s were good times for the Walton family. Unfortunately, though, for Sam and Bud, maybe fortunately for Walmart, they don't really get shaped by the 20s. You know, they're still like little kids growing up in the 20s. What really shapes them is the 30s. And the 30s were very, very different for the middle of America, all of America. But the hardest hit part of the country during the Depression was the Midwest farming community because of the Dust Bowl. So if you've ever read The Grapes of Wrath or any of the great novels, Steinbeck or otherwise, from that period, it was terrible. People lost everything, crops failed. And what was the Walton family doing at this time? They were like doubly leveraged. It wasn't just that they were farmers, they were financiers of farmers. So they're living in this nice town of Columbia at this point. Tom has to go travel around to all these farms that he'd financed and foreclose on them. Literally kick people out of their farms, out of their homes. And he would bring Sam and Bud along with him for this.
I remember reading in Made in America, I sort of thought that what Sam was going to say is that his father worked with these farmers the best he could to help them save the business where they could or cut a deal. But no, what he actually just said was, and he just did it in the most humane and decent way possible. And you're like, whoa, there were not deals or negotiations to be struck. It is, we are foreclosing and we just have to be a good human to you. Well, this is definitely happening.
I mean, that's probably why he brought the kids along, right? Probably hard for somebody to attack him or get too mad if he had his two little kids there with him.
I wonder. Yeah.
Crazy times. But yeah, so all of this makes an impression on Sam. And Sam says in the book, in his very Sam way, quote, all of this must have made an impression on me as a kid. Although I don't ever remember saying anything to myself like, I'll never be poor. But he says one thing my mom and dad shared completely was their approach to money after all this. Quote, they just didn't spend it.
I think we've already kind of made the point, but the Walton family goes on to be the wealthiest family in the world.
Still.
All of Sam's future generations are worth a few $100 billion, depending on the day that you look at Walmart's market cap, since it's nearly all invested in Walmart. But it's a multi-$100 billion family.
Yeah. Incredible to go from that to this in 2 generations. So, like many kids during the Depression, Sam and Bud, as they're growing up, they do all sorts of odd jobs around the house to help out the family. Their mom goes in Colombia and gets some cows and sort of restarts part of the farming business. She starts a milk business that they help out, milking the cows, delivering to neighbors in Colombia. Sam starts selling magazine subscriptions. He also starts selling rabbits and pigeons that he raises in the backyard. I don't know who was buying the rabbits and pigeons, but that's what he does.
He learns retailing at a young age, though.
Indeed. And then, of course, like every good acquired protagonist, he gets a newspaper route for the Columbia Missourian, just like Warren Buffett.
That's right. That was on Berkshire Part 1, that episode we did?
Yeah, I think that was Part 1. Yep.
Oh, that's right, because he delivered the Washington Post before later going on to become a major shareholder.
So besides all of these sort of proto-entrepreneurial ventures that Sam is undertaking as a teenager, he also becomes, at age 13, the youngest Eagle Scout ever certified in Missouri history. Ben, you were an Eagle Scout. How old were you when you became a...
I got one just in the nick of time when I was 17 and a half. You must get one before you turn 18. That is the last day that you can get one. You cannot become a Boy Scout, and this is the rules now. I don't know if it was the rules then, but until you're like 12 or 11 and a half or something like that is when you sort of graduate Cub Scouts. So Sam got his Eagle at age 13. So it must have been the only thing he did for that year and a half or whatever. Like, that's the fastest advancement to go through whatever 5 or 6 ranks in that short a period of time.
Maybe he counted raising the rabbits and pigeons.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe some merit badges in there.
So the other thing, this is pretty crazy, that young Sam as a teenager exhibits. He becomes the quarterback of the football team in his high school. Sam, if you've ever seen any photos or video, he's such an incredible, folksy dude. Listening to his talks is just amazing. He's 5'9" and very slight. So you wouldn't think that he's going to be a great football athlete. Of course, we're talking about American football here. This is incredible, though. I think they win the state championship every year because he never loses a game. This is crazy. He writes about this in the book. He says, I think that record had an important effect on me. It taught me to expect to win, to go into tough challenges, always planning to come out victorious. Later on in life, I think Kmart, or whatever competition we were facing, just became Jeff City High School, the team we played for the state championship in 1935. It never occurred to me that I might lose. To me, it was almost as if I had a right to win. Thinking like that often seems to turn into sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And man, was that Sam Walton.
There's like 2 sort of contrasting ideas that I've heard different VCs and different founders espouse on both sides. One is, you learn from your mistakes and you learn from failure. The other is, if all you've ever done in your entire career is be in really high performing, very successful environments, then that is kind of all you know how to do. And that's the bar that you hold yourself to. And I think there's totally merit to both.
I think both of these forces shape Sam, right? Like the Depression, the Dust Bowl, foreclosing on farms, his dad struggles, and he never loses a game. All of that goes right into Walmart.
So much of Walmart is trying something, doing an experiment, watching it fail on some small scale, choosing not to roll it out, or watching it succeed and then choosing to rapidly roll it out across as many stores as possible. We'll get into this, but the very first store opening, they put a whole bunch of watermelons outside. It was swelteringly hot, and they started exploding in the parking lot and getting watermelon juice all over all the customers in their cars.
That was actually Walmart number 2.
Oh, sorry.
That was in Harrison. We'll get there. But yes, legendary story. So after high school, he goes on to college locally at the University of Missouri. The only way he can go, because his family has no money, it's the Depression, is he attends on a ROTC scholarship. So he still has to pay his living expenses, and mom and dad and the family aren't going to help out. There's no money in the family. So he keeps his newspaper route. But he's busy, and he has political aspirations on campus. He becomes the president of the class. He's greeting everybody. He's in ROTC. He's busy. So he hires a few people under him to actually do the delivery of the newspapers and help kind of scale the business. By the end of college, he's making $4,000 to $5,000 a year from his newspaper activities, which that's like huge. We're going to get into what his first job pays him in a minute, but $4,000 to $5,000 a year in the 30s during the Depression, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And there's a great quote in the book from the circulation manager of the Missourian. It says, "We hired Sam to deliver newspapers, and he really became our chief salesman. When school started, we had a drive to get the kids in the fraternities and sororities to subscribe, and Sam was the boy we had do that because he could sell more than anybody else. He was good. He was really good."
It's so interesting that this story parallels Warren Buffett's story in so many ways, but the reasons that they're successful are different. Warren's is about understanding the value of compounding. And it's not that Sam didn't, but it's that Sam was a salesman. He's a merchant. He's a retailer. Like, he understands how to learn what people want and then go procure the thing in the way that they want it and deliver that to them. They're different superpowers that manifested both in building early successful periodical distribution sub companies.
Warren basically stayed an entrepreneur. Sam is clearly this natural entrepreneur. When it comes time for graduation, though, he decides, you know what? I think I'm just going to go get a regular job, even though he's making so much money from his newspaper businesses. So he interviews with two companies who come recruit on campus, JCPenney's and Sears. And he goes with the offer from JCPenney.
Which is interesting because Sears was the dominant retailer. Everyone bought everything for their homes, including some homes from Sears.
Yes. I think the first house we lived in Seattle was a Sears catalog home.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, this is what's funny. And Sam is like, he really keeps it real in the book. You could tell this like backward looking narrative of he connected all the dots. He wanted to go learn retail, learn the craft from the best, in which case he would have gone to work for Sears. But no, he writes, "I had big plans for after graduation. I figured I would get my degree and go on to the Walton School of Finance in Pennsylvania." Buffett, just like Warren. But as college wound down, I realized that even if I kept up the same kind of work routine I'd had all through college, I still wouldn't have the money to go to Walton because he would have had to pay tuition. So I decided to cash in what chips I already had. I visited with the two company recruiters who came to campus. Now I realize the simple truth. I got into retailing because I was tired and I wanted a real job.
Wow. It would not bring him any rest, though.
No.
Maybe this first job at Penny's, or as he calls it, Penny. I don't think he colloquializes the way that people did in our era. Like, I always called J.C. Penney Penny's.
Right. Well, he ultimately ends up getting to meet James Cash Penney himself.
Wait, the guy's name is James Cash Penney?
I know. Isn't that awesome? James Cash Penney.
That's almost as amazing as Price Club being founded by a guy named Saul Price.
So he's tired. He just wants a regular job, but he's this natural born salesman. So he goes to work in the Des Moines, Iowa store of JCPenney as like a floor salesman. And he does great. I mean, literally, James Cash Penney comes and meets with him himself. And the story that Sam tells is JC shows him how to tie, packages, merchandise that is sold with the least amount of twine and paper possible, but still make it look nice to save money.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth? Who got the truth now?